Fantastic. Let's have a quick look. And we've got people joining in. That's great. Welcome everybody who is joining up the session. We are in the Marketing Cloud Practical Use Cases bootcamp. So I know that few people reach out to me after last week. I think the fact that we've got the recording shared during the session was really helpful. So we might not see some of the people for whom it was like in very early morning. But that's still, I think it's still a reasonably good number of people coming through, so it's great. We're going to start in just about a second. I'm going to simplify my background a little bit so it's not super destructive. All right, welcome. Yay, hello. Durgesh, I think I said it right. Nice to see you all. So we've got this session number 4 today. Let me just share the screen. And Boys, as always, reliable partner in the background, responding to all your questions and inquiries in real time, and I'm very grateful for partnership with him on this track. It's been really positive and helpful. Let me see, where's my presentation? For some reason it just coming through. Okay, give me 1 second. I don't know why is it doing that. Let's see, share that. And it says it's loading. There we go. So session today is we're going to look into scripting, an introduction to SQL and APIs in Marketing Cloud. There are a few things kind of to keep in mind on what it means and how we're going to be sort of applying that in a practical sense. So because we only have a short limited time to work through, I want to try to put into a bit of a practical perspective on a couple of points, and then we'll do an introduction overview of the others. So plan for today is really we're going to look back into our AMP script, our landing pages and email updates. We're going to introduce that AMP script to get some processing going on and tie a few things together. So there is a bit of a logic here and logistic there. They are actually functional and working. Then we're going to look into using the SQL query in automation to sort of extension. How do we trigger the journey? Because that was one of the questions we kind of took from the previous session as a takeaway, and tie this up together. And then I'll do the overview of the Marketing Cloud API, show you how to configure it within the platform, and at least provide you sort of a reference to a really great library of the use cases. And that's sort of the objective for today. As usual, what we kind of look at, because we're looking at the practical sense, when it comes down to all of these technical scripting, sort of knowledge of APIs and so forth, there are a few things that are expected from someone who's in an implementation side to be able to accomplish. Number one is quite often landing pages as well as API really come down to data collection. So taken into perspective of you've got a marketing campaign, it could be a specific product promotion or an event, people are registering, and we want to collect the data into Marketing Cloud data extension. That's usually one of the very common use cases that you will see where a bit of a scripting involved. And then personalizing the actual experience, not talking about recommendations and whatnot, but taking the data from data extensions in real time and changing the landing pages to represent maybe some of the attributes. So things like custom preference center, which actually should have been like in a separate item here, but these are the examples. Could be to say you've got maybe a link from the email, you go to the landing page, that landing page has some knowledge about you, so it's passing the details between these two items, and then on the landing page you retrieve the data from one or more data extensions and rendering as you go. So that's quite often a common flow in the Marketing Cloud scenarios. Then another extension of that could be almost like interacting with Salesforce CRM. So part of that could be landing pages for custom preference centers. It could be, again, similar like campaign opt-ins, new customer registrations. Could be because often landing pages are sort of embedded as an iframe into site experiences and whatnot, so people could be signing up for newsletters, and as a part of that workflow we want to create them within the Salesforce CRM, and that's something we're going to look into next week. But more like to understand where that flow comes into place. In terms of messages, a lot of the times personalization that comes in with AMP script, less frequently with SSJS or server-side JavaScript, but it could be another side of that. We'll look into utilizing the Go GTL language. It's really rendering, again, using the data from that extensions, sometimes triggering maybe content that sits outside of Marketing Cloud, so sort of like RSS style sort of interactions, and then parsing it through and rendering within the content. So plenty of different options for that. From API standpoint of view, you do need to know how to set it up. In the first place, before you do anything else, you need to be able to go into account and configure the security elements so you can actually go up and start interacting with the platform through API layer. Meaning that you need to know where to find that in the platform, what options you need to tick, and then potentially how do you actually start using, what do you need to use when it comes down to using that from external experiences. And then when it comes down to SQL, it's most of the time transformation of data in Marketing Cloud with SQL, but in another extension of that could be if you need to work with system data views. That's really a nice way of pulling the events data, especially within the email studio, but could be journeys, could be SMS activities where you want to pull up some information. These system views are not exposed in the user interface as data extensions, and therefore SQL provides you really the only entry point within the platform programmatically to access these resources and use them for maybe audience segmentation or enriching customer profile. So some of the examples could be, maybe looking into number of emails sent in the last 30 days, number of clicks and opens for like 3, 5, 7, 10, 20 days and whatnot. In addition, could be cases where you bring data from different external sources and you need to merge that together. So if it's not a complex, huge volume transformation, joining up maybe product with offers, or maybe allocating offers, or maybe doing some sort of segmentation with aggregation of data, like if you need to do sum, averaged and whatnot, like these are the use cases that normally fall into the space of SQL. Today we're going to look into, as I said, implementation of profile update landing page, update the email with dynamic link that it takes us there. So we know, remember one of the things I spoke last time, or at least start talking, is the landing page exists without context. So it doesn't necessarily have access to same details as you've got within the personalization attributes within email. So therefore we want to try to see how do we bring up some additional information. Then we want to look into that SQL query activity and review Marketing Cloud APIs and Postman collection that will enable you, or at least give you an idea of what you can do and how to work with APIs altogether. All right, that's the plan. Let me just pause the share because I want to switch into the next use case. So hold on, that's this rendering. Fantastic. And let me load the platform for you. Let's get in. So I'll do the login. In terms of content, while I'm doing that, so one quick update is just to give you a bit of a heads up. I know there have been a few people who sort of followed us as close as they could have. I did have a bit of a challenge updating the content for you in terms of hands-on guide. I looked into doing that over the weekend and prepare for the next week to have all the complete exercises available within the guide. So if you following in kind of would like to do some of the things from the last week as well as this week, we're probably not going to be able to get it supported until next week. So apologies for that, but we're certainly going to get to that for the next week. And let me just re-log in. Sorry, just getting my toolkit ready and get going. All right, so last time when we sort of looked into, one of the last times we looked into landing pages when we start talking about content, I believe that was session number 2. So we put together placeholders. We effectively did the front end. So we've got HTML, we've got maybe some styling, utilizing Bootstrap or whatnot for building up the actual experience. But we haven't done much of the processing. We didn't look into how do we get the how do we get the actual code that does all the work behind the scenes, and that's something that we want to look into today. When it comes down to scripting, so there are 3 languages in Marketing Cloud that we officially support. Number 1 is we've got AMP Script, which is the most common, and I guess if you've been in the Marketing Cloud ecosystem, you'll see that there's plenty of resources. That's the most commonly talked and spoke about language. It is very similar in the sort of concepts to Microsoft Excel formulas. When you work with formulas, it sort of gets that idea, and if you look into a lot of the functions, they are very similar to a lot of Excel functions. And one of the reasons for that, I guess, is just giving a bit of a comfort to marketers when they started, that it's not super technical, but it is providing you a bit more capabilities than if you just be using plain HTML, because we need to have ability to personalize content, we need to have ability to embed data dynamically and so forth, and therefore there is no way that we can do it with just plain HTML sort of language. So AMP Script was that's one of the sort of flagships for us. Second part is a server-side JavaScript, or SSJS, that is commonly referred to. It is a very old implementation. I think it's 1.2 of ECMAScript service or JavaScript, but again, there are few functions that have been stripped off because of security reasons and whatnot. So it does provide ability for us to do some extra stuff within the server-side environment. It can be used on the landing pages, and kind of like one of the simple distinctions you would hear that we might say that we use AMP Script for emails or mobile. So AMP Script for messages and server-side JavaScript for landing pages. Not entirely true. You can still use successfully AMP Script for everything and server-side JavaScript for everything, but it's not ideal, and it does have a bit of a performance implications when it comes down to execution. So really, these days, there are a few cases where you want to use server-side JavaScript. One of them is maybe when you're working with JSON objects and you need to do some sort of work through them, then it's much easier done in the SSJS comparing to AMP Script. So that's one side. The other side, you might need to do some interactivity with APIs, especially if you're talking about REST APIs. There are some methods, and SSJS seems to be a good option to actually execute that. Third language, which is GTL, or Guide Template Language. It is another sort of newer introduction to the family of programming languages in Marketing Cloud, but it's more, I guess, a templated language, and really great for building transactional messages when you've got like a data set that you need to iterate, whether it's retrieving data from the data extension, JSON payload. Good example where I used for if you've got like a schedule that you need to build, like maybe training classes or events or appointments, or if you've got transactional message that sort of talks about like, here's the card here, or the list of things that you purchased, booked, and whatnot. Then when there is that iterativity, so you iterate through the data set, through the collection of the kind, and you need to render it dynamically. Great language to go through. So we've got a few examples around that, but that's more advanced. And normally I start introduction to, as I refer to, Marketing Cloud programming with AMP Script. That's really the right, in my opinion, it's the right thing to look into. So let's go through a couple of points here. Number one is we've got an email that I constructed, I think in the early, again in the session number 2, where we talked about the content, so that welcome email. And part of what I want to look into that is when we're sending a welcome email, what we want to do is we want to introduce people to, when they join the membership club, we want to invite them to update their preferences. That takes us to the landing page. That landing page submits the form, and we're going up to another processing landing page, and that's effectively the flow that we want to connect today. So we've constructed some of the things, but what was interesting in the email itself, we not necessarily have the link that is going to go and do that. And actually, I don't think I've got that template here, but given up even maybe, let's take even the feedback survey as an example, because it will serve perfectly fine. So we'll get the actual email. When we're talking about that, take the survey, right, we will point to a particular link. And from the email perspective, what we're going up and says, okay, here's a URL. So you can see it's in the bottom left. So when I hover over, there's a link at the bottom left of the screen that tells you where it points into. So right now it just says, it's a landing page. Great. If I clicked on that, or if I go and navigate into that URL, it might not actually do much for me. It could be, work in progress kind of URL. What we want to be able to do is we want to be able to plug a welcome email when I have a content for that to take us to a bit more appropriate place. But besides just taking us to a bit more appropriate place, so here's the link, right? We want to ensure that we're passing some additional elements to that page. And one of the things to go when we go into the landing page, we'll see if you want to submit the form for an individual, you need to have a contact key passed to that. So that's the very first simple thing, but it's a critical thing that we need to do, and that's something that we want to introduce today. So I'll leave the email out of the picture for now, because what our focus needs to be is needs to go back into that cloud pages, and we want to work through these couple of cloud pages to make them work in the first place. Within the cloud page, what we have, and when it comes down to Amp Script itself, you will see there are two syntax types that we can use. There is what we call inline syntax, where we sort of embedding pieces of Amp Script into the actual like HTML content, or we've got a block of code that is not visible to the front end because Amp Script is a server-side language similar to JavaScript, and we execute everything on the server side. So by the time the email renders, that whole Amp Script block kind of becomes invisible to the content, and you only see the result, which is style sheet, JavaScript, and HTML. So we're ending up having a plain HTML as we would normally have to. So in our case, remember, we've got, just kind of reminding you, we've got these two pages. One of them is preferences update, and the second one is our form. So the form has some personalization, right? So that's something that we want to look into, ensuring that we pass that through. And then we want to have a look, how do we actually pass and go into the updating the preferences. So the code that was shared with you, and one of the extra things that I did not necessarily walk through on the previous time when we were sort of going through these pages, is this page itself needs to provide additional details. And in the guide you were saying we need to extract that ID and we need to replace it. Today we're going to look into the actual Amp Script, and you will see where we're going to be replacing these IDs. All right, so anyway, starting with this one. So we've got this placeholder, which is the first name, and then the second bit is for us, remember, we have an action which is currently has a hash sign, which means the form kind of purely goes to itself. So what we need to do is we need to fix that bit. And meaning, if I'm going to look at this code, particularly specifically for that code, I need to provide first name attribute so we can personalize that page. Second thing is, when we're coming to that landing page, we need to somehow direct it to the next landing page. So where do we submit the form to, right? So that's a normal HTML post that we're doing. So we're going to kind of figure out, how do we submit that form and how do we direct it to submit to the next landing page? If I'm going to just purely submit my or provide the URL to the next page, what normally happens is, because it's just a simple form, the HTML processing will take care of passing all of these, one of these selections, because they all have that, they all are related to the group of input elements, and basically we're saying it's the same field. It's going to have one of the values that is selected by the end user. So when they click up the preferences, that's going to be passed through. But the other side is, how do we actually tie it back to that individual? So somehow we need to provide the information to pass from this landing page to the next one. Again, that contact key or subscriber key, as well as potentially any other elements that might need to be taken care of. But for our purpose, it is simplified, and that's what we want to start with. We want to get to the point where we building up that page. So let me get to the reference doc and basically save a bit of a time to say, how do we get that constructed? The code itself provides us with HTML right now. What we need to get down to is we need to get at the beginning of that, we need to start introducing the syntax for Amp Script. So it goes up into that % sign, and let me just zoom in a bit. So you've got % sign, that square bracket, which opens up the place for the Amp Script, and then I've got one line break. You go up into that closing bracket and then 2% signs. So this is really indicating to the platform that piece of the code is going to be AMP script, and even though you can see straight away here, it actually renders it within that piece on the landing page. By the time when we preview that, it's not going to be visible at all for the landing page. Within the code itself, there is a whole library. So if you go into the developer documentation, and there's a whole library of different functions. I'll share the links for the documentation with you so you can go and explore. For our purpose, we need to look into few options and few functions. One of them is, an objective here is, we will be somehow passed a set of attributes, right? So one of them will be contact key, the other one is first name. And I'm making an assumption because that's what our objective is. We need to get to the point that if we are directing people to this page from the email will have to take care of passing these attributes to the landing page. So that's one thing that we need to do. And the second thing is, we'll have to figure out how to build that URL for the form submission, so it actually goes up and provides these details like that contact key to the next page. So these two things. Now let's look into that. Their notation for AMP script, for using variables as any other programming language, we use @, and we give a name to the variable. So I'll call it the first name. There is a function that allows us to retrieve request parameters. So if you're submitting the form, if you're providing attributes to the page through one of the other functions, I can programmatically access them. So I'll go request parameter, and then what I will look into that, maybe I'll call it first name. Okay, so I'm kind of defining what I'm going to be expecting here. So that function, again, syntax is here is case insensitive, so it's really up to your preference how you want to do that. I tend to use kind of like some of the keywords, I use them in all uppercases. I use camel case for variable names, and I use camel case for functions, but I normally start with the uppercase letter here. It's just a bit easier for me to read than instead of all of them being uppercase. But I can easily type that to be request parameter, same way, all right? Now, that's one thing. Second thing is, I'm going to go and say I need the contact key, so I'll do set contact key equals, I'll do the same function. I'm a bit lazy, but I'll do correct that because it sort of distracts me, and I'm sorry. And I'll call it contact key. So CK is going to be my abbreviation. Now, a few other things. You can insert code snippets here. Remember, we spoke about that when it's available through the email templates. You can create some of the commonly used items as a snippets too. And then there are some functions that you can straight away access when it comes down to personalization. So they are like already AMP script functions that are invested here. So if I want to do like uppercase, lowercase, some of the commonly used tend to be more email oriented. So when you need to format the data, not necessarily do these particular functions. So that's one view. And then what I need to do is I need to somehow figure out, and I'll put the comment here, I need to build form URL. Okay. Form, not submission URL. Okay, that's view. If you can see that rendering kind of like really distractive, so similar trick we can do, I think I mentioned it in a previous session, but nonetheless I can wrap it up into the HTML comments, and basically what the system will do is provide like an empty line, you know, coming up here visible, but I can plug it into without any spaces, kind of make it this way, so it's really kind of like not visible by the time it renders out. And when we get to the point of actual rendering, you will only see that empty space for comments. So you can go like script here, and we can have a look how it sort of ends up doing. So okay, we've got these two elements, and because now I've got these first name as a variable retrieved from the request parameters passed into the page, I want to look into how do I replace this notation, because it's a pure play placeholder, right? So we know that this is not any personalization variable, nothing else. Now we've got the actual variable name, and within the page itself now, because we are within the HTML, second way of us using the AMP script, as I kind of was implying before, is I can use %% equal sign at the start and then equal sign %% at the end. And in this situation, I get what I refer to is inline AMP script. So that's inline notation. Now, important for me within that inline notation is I need to provide a formula, use the function or some way of outputting the results so that they are going to be rendered within that space. So in my case, there is a good function that is called v, or short for variable. Again, uppercase, lowercase. So I'll use v, and then within the brackets, I need to define what variable do I need to print out. All it does, it prints out that particular variable for me in this space. So we want the first name to come here. All right, that's an output. Like if I want to be a bit more, let's call it careful, right? This is where I'm going to go and say, actually, I want to do a proper case. And again, it sort of embeds it in line, as you can see. So it adds these extra things that I don't necessarily want. And what we will do is we'll do it this way. So first name, I'll call it proper case because I like seeing that. So in this case, what it will ensure is just, as I mentioned before, commonly used function which makes the first letter of the word uppercase, everything else goes lowercase. So convenient for us, we'll do that, and it gives us an opportunity to wrap up that function to say I don't even need v anymore because the proper case will take care of outputting the result for me. So I can either do v at first name, like print out the variable as is, or if I want to do a bit of a magic here and kind of say actually I need to do some transformation on the fly, then I'll use the proper case first name. Okay, how do we test that all out? So one of the really sort of simple tricks to work with the code is, I think I mentioned before, number one is we click schedule and publish, and when we're doing that we expect the platform to come and render that for us. So you can see that welcome is empty now, right, because we haven't passed anything. But since the page is rendering, we assume that everything works here. So let's do that. So we'll save that. It publishes up. And the whole development in landing pages is a bit of a, let's call it a bit of a challenging experience because as you can see, I need to do code modifications. I don't really test it. There is no kind of like sandbox / pre-processing that you can run the code through. And therefore, I need to kind of find a way how to dynamically do that. So I'll show you a couple of simple steps here, and hopefully it'll give you at least some ideas. There are different options to put in practice, but you can see the page renders. It doesn't do much for us. So I'll use that normal passing through, and I'll call first name equals flat. So if I use that notation, I expect the page to do the personalization. And you can see that it did that, right? So that function that's called request parameters can take get and post request. And because I'm providing that right within the page URL, it is a get request, get parameter. So it's easily sort of passed down to. The great thing with AMP script is that function looks at both get and post and effectively picks up one or the other. If you ask me which one takes precedence, I can't remember, so you'll have to probably test. My assumption would be it will take the post over the get. Might be wrong on that, but at least that bit is covered. Now, another thing that I wanted to demonstrate to you is if you're doing the change. So maybe let's, for example, if I'll be typing in first time, I said request parameters as a function, click done editing. Again, in order for me to pick up the changes, I need to click schedule publish. So right now you will see one of the ways to quickly test if there's any like serious error, like almost very obvious error, normally syntax error, some logic, missing out elements and whatnot. You see that the page is not coming up, right? So that is an indication that there is a code problem within the page. And because the platform cannot kind of go through that without, kind of like not doing much, but just sort of, let's say, compile or precompile. Well, it's not really compiling, but nonetheless, it cannot render the result for me. So right now I know that there is something wrong in my page. A bit difficult because There's no other way to see that there is a syntax error. There is no other way to see, you know, if there is an error indeed. It's just pure play knowing that this is indeed, you know, the case. So quite often what you will find is we're using things like maybe, you know, a GitHub, or one of the hacks we used to do is a Dropbox file. So essentially you get the text file, you drop it, upload into one of these upload services that does a quick synchronization between your laptop and the cloud service. That service has a URL, direct URL, and then you embed the link here through a couple of functions. We're doing like HTTP GET request and rendering as a content. But for now, all you need to do is, when you're working like this way, like normal way as we call it, your code have to be done well, because otherwise you find yourself being challenged. What I see a lot of the times consultants failing to do is figure out which piece of code doesn't work. So let me give you an example. If I'm going to paste a big chunk of the AMP script block from somewhere, and then I'm kind of trying to render that, right? We're going, all right, so how do we actually do that? You know, because it doesn't work and I don't know what to do and so forth. I find like this is kind of like my old programming background, is quite often you kind of need to go through that, you know, disassembly. You need to figure out which pieces of code need to be going through what particular element. So that's not necessarily a great code. Let's say maybe if I chunk that, so just as an example, right? So copy here, I just have some piece of code. Don't sort of pay attention to what it actually does. So I've got like a bucket load of these triggered send effectively pieces that trying to initiate a triggered send execution. So I'm going, well, the page doesn't render, I can't quite do that, what do I do? There is a very simple comment function. So from your place, because I looked at that and say, okay, let's imagine there is no else statement here. So there's a big chunk of code and you don't know which part fails. You normally start at the bottom and you go and take a section of that that you think is going to be 100% functional. So you go, all right, let's comment this bit out, right? So you go, sorry, hold on, this way. And then I'll take and go, all right, let's just chunk this out, all right? So now I'm assuming that this is set, but there are still function calls here. So even though I'm assuming that this whole bit is correct, I may not be right. So go again, done. I'm going to click schedule publish. It will come up with a dialog, and I'm looking into that. I'm going, well, technically, because the page does not do any processing when we're doing this, it should already come through. So again, it's not working. And you pretty much continue following that pattern. So you go and say, okay, if I truly looking into that, these all seem to be exactly the same code, right? So that's not really solving the problem. I need to get to the lowest denominator where I know code work. And you go and say, okay, let's try that bit maybe. Again, save, publish, doesn't work. You go, all right, let's go to that level. And you get to the point where you have a couple of lines of code that work. And then you need to kind of go almost like the way backwards. You go, okay, let's now add a couple of lines and see which one of them fails. A bit unfortunate, but like that's just reality of that. It's like surprisingly how many folks kind of fail to find a way to fight that through. But it's a fast way to get to the point to identify the scope, where the problematic piece of code is. Quite often I'm finding that when it comes down to processing and doing like data input and so forth, there are some functions to handle errors, you know, like when data insert happens and so forth. Again, you can comment out the data extension entry, and you just get to the point where you start doing these things and kind of going, all right, like I want to get to this point and I want to be able to see that. So in my case, like there's another way of doing that, is to say, maybe I'll take a couple of blocks here, and quite often it gets down like you set up some variables as a controlling functions, and then what you can do is you can say, all right, output, and I'm going reached point 1. So it's almost like a pointers. And knowing that these functions, like I've just corrected them out, right? So if I do done editing, if I schedule and publish, then I should be able to see when we run that, it should actually print out that line somewhere in HTML. So one thing is the code is now functional. I save it, publish, go back into that landing page, and I believe it should print out. I hope I did it right. Just again, don't quote me on that. It's going to be embarrassing if I didn't use the right function to effectively do that. And it looks like I didn't. Page source. So nothing is here. Maybe it needs to be output line, not just output. Okay, but like one way or another, there is a function that does that, and I can go up and say output, was it line? Let's try that. I'm just curious to see, there was a function that does that. Still doesn't come as rendering. All right, let me find this out. Yep.
Vlad, you might want to add concat. I think it uses concat with that.
For the output line?
For output.
I thought it's just a string, and it should just spin it out. Ah, hold on a second. All right, I know what I've done. Remember, because it outputs the text. All right, so have a look here. I know what's happening here. Schedule publish. Just say it works. This is one of the tricks I do get into things myself, because it is within the HTML comments. Surely I'm not going to see much, so let's do a quick try, and let's view page source. There should be a place where the comments are. Script. Odd. I might hack a bit more on it. Let's see if we've got towards the end. I would expect it to come here within the actual comment, not within the text itself, because I'm still operating within that HTML comment. But it's a bit odd that it didn't render, so my bad. I'll chase it up. Either way, so practically, like, I mean, maybe you do one of these, you know, like I don't know, set step equals step 1. And then to your point, maybe what we'll do is we'll say, okay, here at the very start we do % equals, and we'll do v step. All right, let's try that. Done editing. I'm sure these should work. Okay, so it says step 1, right? So it will get to the point where you kind of like stick around. I do use divs sometimes, like additional divs with a like debug mode, and just kind of building up a string as I go, and then I print it all out on the page, and it's kind of gives me the same. So I know like there's one central place where I print out all of these things, and I can see them coming through as I go along. So at least like you just need to kind of think a bit creatively what I'm trying to say here in order to be able to effectively code within the Amp script. Okay, so next thing is our next point would be you know, form URL, and we need to figure out how to get here. So at this point in time, we don't really have much. What we want to do is we want to figure out how to build it out, and in order for us to achieve that, there's one thing I need to go back and kind of indicate you. How do we get there? So we've created 2 pages, so let's do save and exit. And right now we're looking into that processing page. That was the second one that meant to kind of go through taking the results and effectively doing crunching of some magic. We need to get to the page details. So I need to look into that page ID, and I need to make a note of that. So in your case, it could be a different page ID, but essentially when you create that landing page, after you create that, you look at the properties and you get these page ID. So I'll make a copy of that, and I'll come back here and open content. That's again, this is still my form, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come and say there is a function that's called cloud pages URL. So in this case, I'm providing ID, so it's a pure plain number, and within the action form here I can say the same way. I don't think I need to redirect to, so I'll double check that. %, I'm doing the same form URL. Okay, so it's kind of like sometimes it could be a bit misleading because we're using %% sign. Remember, they are the same as you use for personalization when you're using attributes, but because you've got equal sign, that sort of tells you that this is actually switching into that Amp Script context altogether. So what this function does is it generates the link to another landing page. Has to be within that account. It has to be within that business unit. So it's either need to be at the top level business unit, or it needs to be within that particular business unit. And I can now securely pass additional parameters to that. So you will see what actually happens when I've done editing, and I do the same. Schedule publish. Okay, we'll do save and publish. And by the time it gets in, okay, so it's green. Hopefully it does the quick update for me. So if I looked at the view page source, okay, integrity, where's that form element? There we go. So you can see that it's sort of, hold on. Did I put it in the right place? I did. So it creates a link to another cloud page. So it's not, instead of just using that hash, it actually puts up the URL. Now, this is plain URL. There is nothing else. System kind of gives me like, okay, this is the way to get there. But if I'm going to get to that URL, there's nothing that's being passed in the context, right? So we're kind of looking at the, we only come in here again. There is no even first name passed around, and we want to be able to pass that information from the previous page down to this page, as well as the contact key. So that's one thing that we sort of need to kind of figure out. How do we actually do that? Okay, and that's where what we want to do is to go, all right, well, let's take that next step, and we actually gonna do almost like, it's kind of like relaying back the message. So we're gonna go and say we want to pass the first name parameter, and we're gonna use the first name variable. We're gonna do the same straight away. So I'm gonna go and say contact key. We're gonna pass contact key. Okay. So now this function, as you can see, it's a bit longer now. We've got a couple of points here. So it takes the ID of the page in the first place, and then for any pair after that, it takes the string, which is going to be our key, and the value, and ties them together. And what it will happen as a result of me doing that is, by the time when I go to the other page, when I submit the form will actually include, as a part of the URL, all of these extra attributes. And using the similar code, I should be able to go to the other page and retrieve the first name and contact key and embed them into the page for personalization point of view. All right, so let's have a quick look and see how that sort of all comes together. So I'll do done editing. I'll do schedule publish. Same story, that's sort of live and actionable. It's great, doesn't complain. And I'm gonna come here. And probably what I might do is, well, actually, let's do it this one way. Let's do the screen review, page source, because what I would expect it to be, it has to have a bit longer URL. Again, that didn't happen, and I think I might need to do a redirect too. So let me just view that. How are we going to do that? So if I submit page preferences, just double checking, so it goes up to that URL without passing anything. That's not the result I want to. So what we want to do is we want to wrap that into redirect to. Pretty sure that's the function call. I'll learn about that pretty quick. Again, doing that from memory, so apologies if I get any mistakes, but I've got, for you, I'll have the copy of the code that will work, but more showing you how you kind of work with all of that as you come along and work on the pages. So we go here back, and let's see, view page source, index chart still does that. All right, so something is not quite right, because I expect that to be a fully functional action, but for some reason it keeps rendering. Okay, we'll leave it for a couple of minutes and see if that's just pure play update of the page itself. So just double checking form URL, So form URL, it's cloud pages URL. Again, one other trick that I do find myself commonly capture that is if I looked into the developer.salesforce.com, how do you work with all of these different functions? And it's something kind of to be aware of. So you're going up into the developer side. There is really only one documentation where you want to go. You've got different elements here, and you can look into them by products, or you can look at them at different docs. So maybe searching for some things, I'd normally go through the product line, and then within the marketing cloud, when it comes down, because that's something that we want to go anyway. So you've got multiple things. So number one is you've got these discovery, talking about different programmatic languages, SDKs and whatnot, then talking about building things, and then more specific items within the API. Our interest right now is within the programmatic languages. So we want to navigate to the point where we've got the list of these different options and reference points. So when I reach here, you will see, as I mentioned before, 3 different languages. And our play here would be the Amp Script, because we're working with the Amp Script. In the function reference, you see all different functions grouped together by the type, or what things do they do. So in my case, it could be HTTP. If I looked into doing some things and I'm going, okay, what does a redirect to looks like? You've got the description, what the thing does. It tells you how to apply that in some of the examples. So in our case, we kind of did a similar thing, but it might have been not necessary item, because practically the function that I was looking for should have done the job for us. So let me find that. There are some output and output lines that I can look into. The v function, as I said before. So hold on, I think it was sites maybe. It's been query parameters, cloud pages URL. So that I usually get cloud page URL, not cloud pages URL. There we go. So in our case, if we use a, then we do the redirect to, but I might be using that for pure play form, then therefore I don't need to URL. So the only thing I know that sometimes that trick with double quotes and single quotes can play a bit of a difference. So let me just quickly test it out, because that's something that I've seen before. So let me do this print out v. I change the function, and that's the last thing I'm going to try, and after that we're just going to carry on and do some other stuff. As I said, I'll make sure that for you we'll have a fully functional code that does work all together properly and nicely. So if I'll do done editing, schedule publish, let's see if that will make any difference. It could be the fact that I'm not using authorized domain, but I wouldn't expect that to be the case, so we'll see. Alright, let's do one last time, review it, and if it doesn't render the right way, well, it doesn't render the right way. So I'll close that bit. I want to know here if we're doing the right thing. So what I'm looking for is that. There we go. So that worked a little bit better. And as you can see, it's now appending a query string. So that's what I was expecting, and specifically that bit. Okay, so if I zoom up a bit, this bit was exactly the same before. Now that part was added because of that cloud pages function. So what it does is we're utilizing internal platform encryption to merge these parameters that we're passing into the encrypted string, and that becomes a parameter that's been passed to the next landing page. So when I submit that form, you will see that this is really another request parameter that's sort of being pushed into the other page, and therefore when I arrive to that page, I can now retrieve the first name, the contactee, and so forth. So that actually did the trick, which is great. What we're going to do is we're going to look into going up to the other page and kind of working with that. So let me just do these 2 elements here, and go to another page to show you that it kind of does what we expected it to do. Alright, time-wise, just a time check. So at this point in time, we want to do a very similar thing. Again, we want to put it into comment block, because we don't want that to be rendered. We want to add the %% open and close. So we know this is Amp Script, that's great. But first name, contact key. So what we're going to do here, do exactly the same. I'm going to say % equals, and we're doing the first name. So at this point in time, it should bring us the value here. So we'll do done editing. And again, as you can see, I'm only testing a part of that. But what the other thing that we need to look into, so that renders, that's great. So save and publish. I might look into just doing an output just to demonstrate to you that it's actually passing not just these element, but actually the form component too. And what I mean by that is the preference that someone will select, right? So let me just get the name of it because I don't recall it from memory. All right, so input value category name. So category, that's the attribute that we're passing through. So we'll just go your double added set category equals category. Okay, your preference. Don't need that. Actually, let's do whatever that is saved. For the sake of it, and here we'll do the same. So we'll do % equals b equals root, and we'll do category. So in this case, because I'm submitting, as I said, I'm submitting 2 items. First name that we're passing through. It's almost like, you know, hidden parameter to the form, but we're doing it in a better way, because hidden parameters, you can look into the source, you can find them. In our case, we're doing a bit of a more secure way, because we're embedding these parameters in the encrypted fashion into the next URL by the time the form sort of is being rendered. So it is hidden from the end user from the security standpoint of view, but still gives us the opportunity to pass the details. So if I choose hiking here, click update preferences, hopefully I didn't lie and everything works. There you go. So first name passed. Remember, that was the hidden pass-through. And then natively, because the form submission, and that's something that HTML sort of does through the server side anyhow, we just pull out that attribute and we're presenting it. So at this point in time, I've got, assuming I've got the contact key passing, I've got the preference captured from the form, I've got the first name to personalize that. The contact key will enable me to write the function that writes into the data extension and update the data extension. And then, you know, I use the category to save against the contact individual within the data extension. Okay, this works in the same exact same fashion if I'm going to be going up and creating the email where we're asking customer to, you know, like to submit their preferences to take them to the landing page. What we want to do is we want to kind of do the exact same thing. So let me go into the email itself. And I'm not going to tie up all of that because it will take me another time to code the updates to the Ds and whatnot. The point being, kind of now what we've done is we kind of look into 2 items. We can come to the landing page, right? So we can come to the form landing page. We're expected to provide certain attributes for it. So we'll get the contact key and we get the first name provided as a part of the coming to the landing page. We will pass them silently to the next page, to the processing page, as well as whatever the form selection that user does. When we get to the processing page, it will take these elements, retrieve them, save them to the data extension, and then render the result. So that's a very quick and simple way of looking into that. For me, in order to kind of do the exact same work for email, to pull the details for, like, say, how do I pass this information to the landing page? Again, I need that page ID. So let me make a note because I might copy some other code. So I'll do 1, 2, 2, 3, 7, 5. I'll do the copy. We'll see if I can go. And the email that I want to construct, I want that to be pretty much doing the exact same job. So I want it to go into landing page with passing up some additional information from the set. So in our case, remember, we looked into some personalization variables that are available to us, and when we're sending an audience, we can pull these extra details from either data extension that we're sending to or from another place. Now I'm going to create a new email, so I need to do email message. I will use the template. I'm going to quick look into my reference while it's loading up, because what I want to do is I want to have that welcome image, welcome email. So main content over here. It is similar to what we did with the feedback survey, but it has a slightly different play. And I want to show you, there's another thing I mentioned, how to use the contextual understanding when you're building these emails. So I'll do welcome to loyalty. Okay, let's just go next. Remember that placeholder, that's the one I was referring to, that we want to make sure that we having these details in place. So let me see, I think I do have that in the guide. Subject line, okay, let's just make it super simple. Welcome to our loyalty program. I'll skip the details here. So what we want to do is we want to get a couple of components here. Number one is we've got this piece of information. Where's the welcome email body? It's that. So let me see over here. We want to get a free form. Hopefully I've got that saved correctly. Okay, thank you for your business. We've done editing. So as you can see, simple email, and I should have had a button here. For some reason it didn't come through, but let's say we'll just add a button here. Just add a button block over here. What we'll do is we'll call it update your door preferences. Okay, so we've got the button here. It's great. What we need to do is we need to figure out how do we link that. So if I looked into HTML editor, practically at this point in time, there is somewhere where it says, okay, over here, it's not taking us anywhere. So we need to build the URL for that. Again, we're going to use Amp Script because we want to pass a particular item. So what I'll do is I'll do link URL, and maybe we're going to look into Cloud Pages microsite. Okay, so now interesting thing is I can now go and choose the site. I can go choose a page if that works, right? So if it comes up and tells me like, hey, do the site, but I don't see the site here, so that's a bit of a trouble. And therefore I normally go up and build up a bit of an Amp script and do exactly the same as we did with a landing page. If you're looking into using some other elements, don't forget that there's always these items, but we'll just kind of go and say, okay, this is going to be other, and we will do similar fashion, but because we are in the button, remember in the documentation there was that redirect to, and we're gonna do this way, and we're gonna go and say preferences URL. Okay, so done editing, and if I need to do it like the preferences call to action. Track and alias is important because we see in the reports what's being clicked on, so it's a good idea. Click here to update your preferences. Okay, done editing. So the page is kind of like, all right, we've got this place, but now we need to add some Amp script. So in my case, I'm going to come here. That's the reason why I've got this initialization block. I'll normally stick it to be HTML. So I know that this is code, and you really work with code here. You don't necessarily need to go and try to be even something smoother, but the important bit is how do we actually build it all out. So last time, as I said, I wanted to go and demonstrate to you, like if I start doing the code here, it's going to be the same as we saw on the landing page, right? So the code comes up in the email template. It's big, it's bulky. Depending how far we can go, we might have a couple of pages of script. So let's say if I want to do something like this, and even to the point of maybe I've got this code prescribed. So here we go. You can see that it's all been lined up into one long piece of string. Very sort of obstructive, it's not comfortable, and you're kind of looking into that when you work with that, it's not very handy. So quite often it overlaps. And imagine if you've got pieces of AMP script somewhere down the line, because the way we execute, one of the other things to be aware of, the way we execute that, we go from the top of the email to the bottom of the email. So you might have something to do at the top, then you might have something to do at the bottom. Just want to make sure that it all sort of pads together. So in this case, there is an interesting hack. So I'll copy that entire block and demonstrate you what it looks like. And all of a sudden you see that while I'm still using the same approach with comments, right? So that's one trick. But you can see that the block actually comes up with a very nice, neat information. This is initialization block for variables. Click to edit AMP script. Great. When I click on that, it will come down to here, and you can see that I've got a bunch of different things happening over here. How I've done that last time, it's part of the personalization strings, and that's why I recommended to look at that is, or actually not the last time, the previous time, understanding what is available by default. So that message context variable or personalization variable that's available within the message, there are different context options. So if I'm saying I'm in the preview, which I am right now, because I'm using that if statement, the system will only render that block, and it will ignore completely and entirely this entire piece. So that's a great thing about the AMP script. As you can see, it can be embedded inline within and around the HTML, can mix up, break up, as long as I'm keeping the structure. If I open with the if function, continue with end if, the system will handle it correctly. So it's kind of pretty cool to what you get down to. And in this case, all I need to know is I say, okay, there are a couple of variables I'm setting up. So things could be like get the data source name, so I can maybe using that for the send log. I'll pick up the local send date time, so I get the timestamp and actually look into what is the system timestamp, and then convert it to local date time on my account. Then remember, we need this first name and contact key that we want to pass to the page. So at that point in time, here's the function. So you can see that already taken care of doing the proper keys, and try to be sort of implied everywhere and over, but nonetheless. So we'll change that to be number one is, I think, okay, I'll update the link there as well. So it's 122.375. First name, remember the FN, instead of subscriber key, I'll get contact key, and then email address if I need to, but in my case, I don't need an email address, so we'll just keep it subscriber key, whatever that is. Right, subscriber key is pulled out from the underscore subscriber key. Again, convenient, because I can look into whatever different attributes can be in the sendable data extension, but I know that it doesn't matter whatever field was nominated to be subscriber key, that value is going to be passed to the context, and then I'll just pull it out. Same if I need to get an email address that we're sending to, I can use that personalization variable. So these are some cool things that just kind of like good to know and good to have. So called it the CTA URL. So let me just fix that up and then go back into my button and update that to be a CTA URL. It's call to action URL. So cool. So what we've done right now is we effectively said, okay, for the AMP script, as I mentioned in the session number 2, is it's a nifty trick, right? So if I'm in the preview, I'm gonna look like in the editing here when I'm creating that, it sits nicely, and it doesn't matter how big and long your piece of code is, it actually nicely wraps up into that convenient piece of information that you can see. This is the initialization bit, and you know by the time when we actually get to the execution, it will disappear because we're not, it's within the comments, but practically it's just going to go and not be visible here, and then the whole entire email will be only visible. So if I look at as an example, it should come to me and show me like whether it actually works. There you go. So it is still a preview that still sits here, but it does the personalization and passing up the variables. I'll have to do the actual test to see what these variables would look like when we actually get into the string. So ultimately, practically playing back, what we've done is we've added a piece of AMP script within the email. We passing dynamically some of the variables from the send context. These are the subscriber key and first name that is available to us as a profile attribute or as the attribute of the target data extension. I'm wrapping them up. We're creating a dynamic Cloud Pages URL, similar to what we've done on a landing page. And again, I think I should have been doing is using that single quotes, not the double quotes. I do have that tendency of using double quotes, but I know for some functions, like this one specifically, it actually doesn't play super well. So should remain consistent here. So we've got that. Then we're using that call to action URL, with the only difference is we need to pass to that link. We need to use redirect URL or redirect to function. If you read into the documentation, again, something to kind of get yourself familiar with. The reason why we're doing it is because by the time when I looked into how this button is built up, it's actually using anchor tag in HTML, and we know from the documentation that it says explicitly, if you're using these links within the anchor tag, you need to wrap your URL that you built up dynamically into that redirect to function. So that's why what I've done is, instead of just outputting the call to action URL like we did on landing page, we're saying redirect to, and that's the difference between the email and, for example, landing page context execution. So we've done that. The system, what we'll do is we'll take care of making the tracking, wrapping, and so forth, and then practically it will function the right way for us. All right, so that kind of gets me to the point of we've done the email update. We get the email that's going to be sent out. The people click on that email. They take into the landing page. On the landing page, they choose the preference, click it, saves. It goes up and updates the data extension behind the scenes. So that's one part of what I wanted to do today. Is ticked off. Updated landing pages, updated email. I think next one for us was SQL. So let's have a quick look. Just going to go close and save and exit. We did discuss, we've got a number of data extensions in the platform, and we go into the Automation Studio if we want to do some transformation with the data. So I did upload the file into the FTP for me to create the test data. So let me do a quick run of the data import activity to get that in. At this point in time, I think I've done only customer data. There we go. So I will do another import file, and I'll do a quick setup while I'm doing it. So what I want to do is I want to import an additional sort of transactional data, and for the purpose of our journey, we want people who completed the rental yesterday. So we import rental file into the, I'll do mine. So target, it actually worked better for me than using my internal email address. File sits in FTP folder. You can see rental, that's the one I want. Rental.csv. Perfect. Date format, I'll switch to, actually, do I need to? Yes, I need to. English, because I did have a formatting, but we'll see. So anyway, come here, and I want to get into the staging data. Let's just say, actually, for the purpose of that, let's do rental. Just to really matter. I will do add an update, and that will do the trick. Alright, so that bit is done. I'm going to save that. And beautiful thing with the program is I can actually run once, but I want to choose the only activities that import file for rental D. Alright, so I'll do a quick and dirty way of doing that. There we go. Off we go. Once the data comes in, what I want to do is I want to be able to start merging the like some of the data sets, but practically what I want to do is I want to create the audience for my journey. And part of the data extension configuration that I did was, let me get into the contact builder just to refresh that in mind for you. Close up these couple of pages that I have open. is that I've created, set of different data extensions to import data, but specifically for the journey, we've configured using a queue, a specific data extension that is our target. And there are a few elements that we're picking up from that. Based on the requirements, the need for us is to bring up the customers who completed their rental 1 day before today. So when we're running this program, I need to be able to pick up all of these different customers that completed their rentals 1 day before today. That's what we're looking for. So I'm going into the, I think I put staging data, right? So rental, 30 records. If you look into them, there's a good chunk of them. And more has it information. You've got the rental ID, so it's a primary key. You've got customer reference, booking, vehicle, start date, end date, and duration, and a couple of flags. So we've got populated all at the same time. Basically, what we're looking for is we say I need to know who is the customer that I need to add to the journey, which is our customer ID. We remember when I was configuring the journey, we used rental ID as a part of the audience, or sort of some of the decisions within the journey. So I'll need that element, and my criteria would be as simple as where end date is. Today minus 1 date effectively. All right, so where do we put that is we're going into the journey data, and our data extension here is just to remind you that we've got customer ID and rental ID. That's all we need. We've got date edit, and the system should hopefully populate it for us, so we'll see how it sort of all works together. Okay, practically, how do we do that? So we go into creating, within the same workflow, I'll just use it as a continuation of the program. We will use an SQL query activity. If you ever need to go and understand what we do within the Marketing Cloud, one of the biggest sort of considerations to know when you start working with SQL is you need to know a few things. So yes, system provides the ability to pull up the data together from more than one data extension and potentially system data views. But it writes it into the target data extension. So one very common question is, can I create the target data extension on the fly? The answer is no. Before you write your query, you need to design what are you trying to put together, and you're building data extension for the result set ahead of the time. That's before writing the actual SQL. Okay, the way system works in Marketing Cloud is, think of that as what we need to write is, we're not writing insert, we're not writing update, we're only writing select statement. Because what we do is we kind of encapsulating and providing, safe environment to work with data without, potential for SQL injections and everything. So what you're writing is the query that puts together a data set. So you're defining how many columns you want, where they sourced from, any criteria. And then when you did that select statement, system kind of put it into that temporary space for you in memory, and then dumps it into the target data extension. So how the updates would be, or how the data are going to be saved, is based on the selection similar to the import. So you will see that we have to say, do we want to destructively overwrite data in the data extension, or do we want to add an update, right? So that's a similar kind of principle. So I'm going to create a new query activity. I'll call it, refresh audience for feedback survey journey. Okay, and I'll keep it as a simple. And this is where the place that we need to write the actual SQL. Okay, similar to Amp Script, but it's a little bit better here, because practically we actually do have a tool that you need to install in your account that's called Query Studio. And you can build it interactively, building it up, running it, seeing the results, and then if you know that it works, great, you can save it and then put it into Automation Studio. The other side of that is you can kind of craft it here if it's not too complicated. You know that you're writing select something from particular table, and then maybe you've got a criteria here. So where, I'll keep it the same from, where. I do struggle with that alignment. So where, and then we're writing the actual SQL. So in my case, what we want to do is we know the result set. So we're going to go and say, okay, if I look at the journey data, and I looked into event queue, I need to populate customer ID and I need to populate rental ID, right? So these are the two things that I really need from that. Now, where does that information come from? So I'll get rid of the extra comma. And this one, I'll just go to the next line. We're looking into sourcing that information, in my case, from the staging data at this point in time. So from, oops, I don't want that. I'm glad that I kind of didn't write. So it's a rental-stg. So I'll go rental-stg in this case. And then when I look into the data extension, if it has exactly the same names, that's kind of like me being a bit lazier. I go, oh, or cheeky, I should say, not lazy. I've done a good design. I align things together, so it should be easy for me to operate with them. Basically, I'm saying select customer ID from here, rental ID from here. Great. Remember, I need to still write where some sort of duration needed. So I'm going where end date, and I need to apply some function here. So I can do and say where end date. Here I can use some functions of SQL. Now we support within the environment, and something for me to double check and say. I think last time when I was referring to that, I said it was SQL Server 2011. I believe we are up to 2016 at the very least, if not newer, but functions in the UI are a bit more restrictive than functions on the back end. Unfortunately, if I use some functions from the more recent SQL Server engine, they're not necessarily going to be validated in the UI. So just be mindful of that, little tiny element, and kind of do read up on the documentation page for SQL what is and is not supported. But practically you can test it all out, because by the time when I write it, click validate syntax, the system will actually do evaluation and tell me if it's working and acceptable and not. So I'll go date diff, and from memory I need D between end date and get date. So trick here is get date gives me, that's one of the other things to be aware of, is get date gives you a central standard time. We've got all of our sort of database service sitting it up in the central standard time. So there are functions like time zone conversions and whatnot, and there is a great post on LinkedIn. I can't remember exactly who posted that, so apologies, but you can always search for it. There are maybe few tutorials by now where people will walk you through how do you do these conversions. Objective here is not necessarily teach you how to write full SQL. It's more of giving you an idea where to find and how to work with that within the platform. So you can do that and say, okay, which is, let's say less than 2. Actually, I think I have that saved somewhere. So let me get a sneak peek and have a quick look before I save that. Oh yeah, I've got a better version. I knew that I've got a better version. All right. So because it's a function, it's going to evaluate in a bit differently. So from performance standpoint of view, we can even write a better version. So okay, where end date is greater than, and I'm going to do date add. We're doing dd, that's notation of SQL function, -1. And then what we're going to do is we're going to cast get date as date. Okay, and that should do the trick. So date add, I need another bracket here, and if I don't, if I just click validate sequence, it'll tell me something is not really good. Fix that up, validate that. That sort of works. If, as I said, if I want to test it out, you can use, because quite often you do find that, like, does it work, does it not work? So if I go into the Query Studio, I can do that in real time, and this is something I would certainly encourage you. It could be the challenge because that the Query Studio needs to be installed from the App Exchange. It's a free application from the Salesforce Labs, but it needs to be installed and you need to be granted permissions to that. So just making sure that when you are working in the account, you do have access to that, and you'll have to kind of work through permissions to bypass the fact to be able to do it. But once you do it, you can build it up as you go. I do know that quite often I find like some of my annotations, like using, brackets, the square brackets, the platform may or may not support that. So you'll see like some things do work, others don't, and therefore, just need to kind of figure out how do I run that. So in this case, not very convenient, but if I maybe do it this way, so just similar to what I was telling you with Amp Script. If that works, it will come down and tell me. It doesn't seem to work, so I think, I don't know, from rental stage as R, and I believe if I do it this way to get a bit more appropriate syntax, that may actually work. Let's see. So it's kind of like playing around, and the way it doesn't seem to like reference to the tables when they're in square brackets, but because I've got spaces, there is no other way for me to look into that. But you can see that's already giving me a bunch of different rows. So what I want to make sure is, did I do it right or did I not do it right? Did I use the right item or not the right item? So go r dot and date, because I want to see what they are. And again, this is similar to landing page. You kind of like, one of the things to work with SQL that I find is like, if you work in this environment, previously it was much harder, because if you pure play running up SQL query activity, then the only way to see the results is you need to build it, save it, run it within the automation program or as an activity, go into the data extension, have a look, and then you go, all right, it's the result that I was expecting or not. With the Query Studio, you've got an opportunity to actually write it as you go, test it out, and then get to the point where it runs, it gives you the result, and you kind of see the how it sort of works. So okay, it tells me that it was March 25. There's a bunch of these different options, which is great. I suppose that these are the ones. I've got 16 rows. I know that, I do remember that my data extension had 30, so I'm assuming it kind of works. If I do, the way the function kind of here works is to say what is the current date minus 1 day, and then the end date should be past that. So it seems like it sort of logically fits into where I am today, because for me it's March 26. So I'm assuming that all of that was right. And because we looking whether or not we're converting that at the daytime, it hopefully aligns back to the server time as well. As I said, you can save that query if you need to, but for me, I know that was sort of done already correctly, so I'm going back into my automation studio and saying, yep, that's perfectly fine. So I'll click next. My target data extension, so I'm going up into journey data and saving that into that event queue. Now, within the journey, when I work with the data, for me it is important to make a decision right now, do I want to store that information or not? So if I choose to say update or append, right, there's different options, it will preserve the data that was previously in the DE. I know that when I work within the journey itself, the data that is being collected as a journey data is actually immutable, meaning that throughout the entire journey, once I got the contact in, that initial record set from the data extension that was my journey entry event remains unchangeable, and I don't have to worry about keeping it. In my case, I'll just go, okay, I'll just overwrite that. That's easy. So I'll do the overwrite, but that decision here implies when we start configuring the automation within the journey, it will ask me, do you want to run latest data set in the data extension? Do you want to go through the entire data extension and add them all in? So if I choose append or update, be mindful that if you constantly adding to the DE and it kind of builds up like a stack, if you're setting in the journey to inject everyone from the data extension, there's a risk that you can get the same individual multiple times. Okay, so just keeping in mind like that's another cause for common errors, because you need to always remember how the way you populate data extension needs to be sort of aligned with how you adding people into the journey. That's important. So two options, two different settings. This tells us how do we maintain the data throughout, because it could be that you have more attributes and you want to preserve them for historical reference. Maybe you will copy it from journey DE into another DE as an archive, like that's one approach, and then you kind of let the data expire, maybe have a retention policy and whatnot. So it's a bit of a bigger conversation here. But practically, always remember that setting here is only tells when you run this query what happens with the data in the data extension at the completion of the result. Because if I choose override, then we're going to truncate the table, and then we're going to try to add more. You might end up with empty result set, you might end up with some records. It really depends on the criteria. But we're going to wipe the DE, and then we try to add more stuff to that. If you choose append and update, then we're preserving what was there, and we're adding new stuff or adding and updating, because update actually works more as an upsert. So it kind of looks and says, if you've got matching primary keys, we'll update them. If not, we'll add new records into the data extension. And it's all sort of hinted here. So keep that in mind. Override selecting, that's great. I've got the section all done, finish, beautiful. That works. Now I saved that data extension the automation program one more time. Now, as you can see, that I've got 3 steps in the automation program, right? Step 1 is import, step 2 is import, and step 3 is query. Fantastic. Leave that as is. We saved it. It's great. Our next step was going back into the journey builder, because I just wanted to demonstrate how, like, what is the actual impact and how 2 things come together once we get to that point. So when I get into the journey, I think last time we were just going up and saying we'll do it one run at the time, right? We looked into the data extension, take all the people in the data extension and kind of push them into the journey. So it's a one-off item. So we say when we start the experience. So I'll say, no, actually, we're not going to do that this time. We're going to change how we're going to activate that. So summary, change schedule type. So because now I can choose, you can see that the system kind of recognizes. Remember last time when we were looking at it, there's only 2 options, run once and recurring. And now I do have an automation because the data extension is now being impacted by that SQL query that I just created. So therefore system tells me, hey, hold on, you can actually use the automation program. And again, the difference between these 2 is this one, I define the schedule right here within the journey builder. So I'll tell how frequently I want to run that. But in automation-led journey, every time I run the automation program, the system will do the injection into the journey builder. So it will follow the schedule of the automation program. All right, so what did I do? Did I save the score changes? I said automation, select. All right, set schedule. So I need to choose the automation, and because it's one program that I do, I need to choose this and then go into the contact evaluation. So now there's 2 options. Remember, I was just referring to that. So I can evaluate new entries only, meaning that the system will go and look at the data extension. It remembers what was the last row it was processing in the previous run, and then take all the new entries from that point and try to evaluate them for the journey. Usually it's a faster one. And that's where if you're doing add an update to the data extension in the query, then you probably want to consider this one. So you're only processing anything that is new. The challenge is that if you're doing updates, the system is not going to pick those up. So that's another consideration to play with. Or you can go and say evaluate old records. And if your DE grows over the time, then it can potentially get to a bit of a slowness in the performance. So we'll go into the new ones. And it says on the first run, we take in everything that sits in the data extension. It's referred to as in the file, but it is data extension altogether. So that gives me the summary. That is done. You can see that the schedule changed over here. I'm going to save that. And by the time the system saves that, what I should be able to see is that an additional activity added to the automation program. Now let's have a quick look and validate my assumption here. So we're going into Automation Studio. I just couldn't remember if it's done at the time when I'm activating that. Yeah, it looks like I need to actually activate the journey. So let's do that. And do the actual publishing. So at this point in time, I'm not concerned about publishing that and activating that, simply because I know that nothing's going to happen until I actually click on the automation program to run. All right, let's see how it sort of all plays up together. We'll do the activate. System will do the validation. Was the feedback provided? Okay, something was configured. I thought that was configured. And hopefully I didn't break up anything here last time. Maybe I did. Yep, it's done. I do get the trick sometimes, so we'll see. Edit this. Well, let's quickly check it, because if not, I'll just delete that and we will start that. So let's see, revalidate. If it complains, I'll just get rid of them. All right, so query wise, very common that you might need to do is, I'm just working with the data to transform what I've got, doing a bit of segmentation, but practically, as I said, might be doing a bit of aggregation, might be pulling data from system.views. There's a whole lot of documentation around that. It's more thinking through, remember that conceptually, selecting the data set, the system will push it into target extension, data extension. You have to have the target data extension before you do that. And then do utilize the Query Studio to validate your code as you write it, because it gets a bit faster to build it out. So yeah, I don't know, test the journey. I thought we'd just go straight into activate. Love to go into the activation. Yes, activate. Goal was there. And off it goes. So what I want to see is, when we activate that, I wanted to demonstrate there is an extra activity that is added to the automation program for you automatically, and you don't have to do anything else. The system does it, you know, without your involvement. But what could be an additional point where, you know, in some cases it actually would make sense to prevent any injections, even from the processing standpoint of view, like depending on how it's all done. So there you go. You can see that the program now has that one extra step. And you can see that activity is included, which is journey entry audience. So again, I didn't add that. System takes care of that for me. Now I might add maybe a verification activity. Quite often it is not a bad idea to even check, you know, if your imports have been successful or not. So quickly demonstrate that. That step is really, really cool, because when you look in and say, okay, so if I looked into the rental staging data extension, or customer, or whichever one, let's say rental stage, if I'm going to look at that, then we're saying, you know, if the count is equal to 0, so if the data extension is empty for whatever reason, we want to stop the automation. So the system, it says, once you meet this criteria, we're not going to progress any further. You can send an email notification if you want to, but sometimes it could be as simple as, you know, like transactional data comes in, you want to do a bit of a validation and say, it doesn't even make sense to continue with the execution if the data that we should be using is not here. So nothing needs to change, and you can pause and hold, and it doesn't necessarily mean that this is an error. We're just kind of saying if it's equal to empty, it's empty, and we don't want to do anything. So we'll stop the automation, we'll log verification outcome, and then in the activity log, but it's not gonna, you know, trigger any further processing. So it's just another thing to kind of be considered. But ultimately, you can see that this is, as I said, the system sort of taken care of for you for the audience journey, and that's sort of how it works. So now the journey is active, but nothing's going to happen until this automation program runs, and that particular step is actually executed by the platform. All right, that covers the SQL part of that. I think we're doing good on time. My last point was about the APIs. So let me kind of jump here a couple of steps back. If I'm on the developer side, so we went into few pages in. I wanted to kind of give you a bit of an idea. So we do have at this stage 2 APIs. One of them is SOAP API, and second one is the REST API. We started with SOAP, between these two, Therefore, it's a bit of an older beast. It does primarily focus around Email Studio, Automation Studio, and a couple of sort of platform features configuration-wise. And then REST is a newer API, and we kind of start looking into, once we start extending the platform, that was becoming a more popular approach, lightweight, faster, and therefore we start looking into changing the API. Unfortunately, they're not at parity, meaning there are some things you can only do in SOAP, other things you can only do in REST. And as any developer who needs to be doing any programmatic configuration and integration with Marketing Cloud, you always need to spend a bit of time, if it's the first time, to even understand what is and is not supported through which particular API. That's number one. Second part is, very common ask is, I need to integrate data into Marketing Cloud. What API can I use? So one big discussion constantly goes around that, but kind of like make it simple for you. If you're discussing with your customer, if it's your business need to implement the integration with Marketing Cloud, data-wise, at volume, so if we're talking about transactions from maybe a commerce platform or purchase confirmations and whatnot, like there's a bulk items that you need to bring into Marketing Cloud. As soon as you see the bulk, then it's a file-based integration. It's much better way to do that, and you will see with the April release, we're gonna introduce ability to integrate with S3 storage, so we don't even have to bring data into Marketing Cloud as FTP. We're gonna go through S3 directly. That will kind of simplify a lot of these transactional movements of files. But practically, as soon as you go into volume, your mindset should be, I'm gonna do file-based integration. If you're talking about transactional, atomic events, things like customer submits the form, I want to trigger something. You can send the data, you can engage and inject them into the journey. You might need to do some certain events. That's the event-driven approach, and that is API. So these are the right valid use cases. Even when it comes to data, you can still use that approach, simply knowing that it's going to be atomic transaction. You don't have to worry about 5 other things. You're providing a specific packaged data set and you need to ship it into Marketing Cloud. That's a great use case. Valid, it sort of implies real-time event. Great, works. Another thing you will see is we're going to release the wait. There's a wait activity or wait for activity that will be available in Journey Builder, and through API you will be able to trigger that. So in essence, we're going to say you get into the journey, you might wait not just for 5 days, but you might wait until customer goes up and updates their preference while they're in the journey, and then once they do that, we will then continue. If over a certain period of time nothing happens, we'll go to the different path. So you will see a completely different experience and behavior. So that's another API example. Again, it's all event driven. As soon as it's an event and you want to propagate that and inform Marketing Cloud about that, that's a great API use case. As soon as you're talking about, oh, but can I, bundle up few records? Like, probably not. Most of the time, this is not. And that's the common distinction to kind of make and think through. Another bit is we do support synchronous and asynchronous APIs, both on SOAP and REST layers, meaning that in some cases, you just need to be mindful of transactional volumes and how you engage and interact with API. And practically, it means is if you're doing a synchronous call, it means that the environment you're calling from is going to sit on pause and wait for the response to come back from Marketing Cloud. And meaning that you put a particular operation in, you provide the payload, the system in Marketing Cloud accepts that, starts crunching through that, and then comes back with the result. Because we are kind of like, think of us as an engine, as a queue-based layer structured approach, meaning when API arrives, we have a layer that says, okay, I will accept that call. And if it's a synchronous layer, it puts that call into processing queue. Then a mini processor comes in place and goes, okay, what's the next item in the queue? Picks it up and then does the operation and comes back, provides the response. Right? So it's pretty, hop driven, kind of like from here to there, and you get a bit delayed, good timeout, depending on how processing works. So there are some sort of limitations of that approach. But if it's critical for you to get the response at that point in time, that's the synchronous call. If you are more of, I just want to inform and move on because I'm maybe like it's a user experience involved and you want to make sure that we're not pausing and halting the user, because when they click submit, like very good example of transaction confirmation, right? People submit it. We want to, in the UI, provide almost immediate result and say, yeah, great, thank you. So all done. You'll expect an email within the next minute or so. And then that API that triggers that email message, for example, it's asynchronous, means we inform the system and we go back and we're told that. Now, asynchronous queue usually implies that you have to think through, how do you check that that event was actually successfully processed, right? That the email went out, that the data was processed correctly. So it just implies a slightly different framework and design for the API. But again, from your point of view, as we started the course, we discussed, you're not necessarily going to be designing that end to end, but you should be able to execute and operate with it. So going back to where we need to, when you start with any API, before you can do anything, you'll have to go and navigate into Marketing Cloud in order to enable yourself to be able to do something. So let me just move one of these items here. You need to go into a setup, and you need to have certain permissions to do that. So let me check if this business unit is available to do that. I should be able to do that. In the setup, that's the place where you configure the API items for you. So go into installed packages. And within this place, what you do is you configure the effectively kind of like a permission set for a user. You're not using Marketing Cloud user license. You effectively creating an API configuration. So I'll do practical course API example. And then provide description. I do recommend, as you can see, there's a lot of things here listed out, and I normally recommend to list out what particular MID you're working with for that particular API. So I'll go MID nice, because once you do it, you don't see it on the screen anywhere. It's, if you've got multiple these different integrations, just want to be able to find it quickly. Practical. All right, so save that, and then when you come here within the package, you start adding components. So for our case, you've got a few different options to extend Marketing Cloud. So things like you want to build your Marketing Cloud app, which is similar to that Query Studio. You want to create custom Journey Builder activity. You want to create custom Journey Builder entry source, so it's an API-led item, or you want to configure custom content block. Like these are sort of more extensions of the platform. And then integration itself, you've got actual API. 3 different types. If you ever done any sort of API, you would be familiar that there are different types, right? If you've got the web app, it's consuming a particular token or secret, public app, and server to server. So for us, we want to do server to server in this case. It's gonna give you client credentials. Again, you need to be familiar with these different types, but depending on the right use case, you'll just need to choose. And then what is very important is to go through that big sort of list of checkboxes and figure out which are the ones that you need to enable. Not a good practice to enable everything by default, because it kind of gives unlimited sort of permission access to do a lot of things. But maybe for my example, if I want to be able to modify emails, read, like send them, I can do that. If I want to work with content, maybe I would just want to provide read, not necessarily write. With automations, maybe I want to do all, similar to the journeys. If I want to operate with them, I can activate, stop all this stuff, delete, maybe not. Contacts, audiences, again, read. Marketing Cloud Connect, if I want to do something, data extensions, I want to be able to do that. Then encryption stuff and so forth. So you get the idea, right? Like I've configured something, you can always come back and update that, remove, add. Some things you need to kind of test out. Practically, when you're doing authentication, when you're doing authorization request, you will, if you don't specify the scope item, the system will give access to all of these scope items that you grant that user. At the request level, when you do an authorization request, you have a chance to actually minimize the scope and say, for that particular operation that I'm doing, even though I might have access to all these things, all I need to be able to do is, for example, read and execute journeys. Like I'm just literally just running it and maybe reading a list of them. So it's a good way to test your permissions when you're working. You can get yourself a bigger permission set, especially when you're developing. And then you go start minimizing and down scoping it within the authorization header and see if every task that you're planning to do is still operational and still executable. And this way you can kind of derive what particular permissions you need to get down to. All right, so once you've done that, the other side of that is access if you are in the multi-business unit environment. So by default, the system will be sitting at a particular business unit, but if I want to be able to access any other business units, I need to specifically choose them. So I want to say like it's, this particular business unit, and you can see that this is enabled. It's a bit of a troublesome setup because if I want to go into BU, I need to click on BU, tick enabled, click save button, then I go to the next one and do that. I can enable it for the entire enterprise. There is a way to do that. So if I'm going to the top level business unit, and I can go and say, do I enable to everything? There are some other ways, but again, often it might become a bit of a challenge. So, but you do it once and then it's easy after that. Setup wise, few things to know. Authentication based URL. It is super important going forward for anyone who's working on Marketing Cloud. Do not use generic API routes. We want you to use a tenant-based URLs. It kind of has a few things that are coming up in the roadmap later down the track. This year it is especially important when we start talking about hyperforce, meaning that when we start going up into this public cloud infrastructure, like these going to be things that you don't want to go and retrospectively fix. So it's already available today. Super important. If you're a developer, make sure that you always use that authentication URL, that REST API layer and the URL, and then SOAP-based URL, right? So these items that you want to do is you want to save them, and they effectively, if you're working in the, I'll refer to Postman environment, for example, with Postman, you just create environment variables, set them up as your environment variables. Same story, because we need to get the authentication, we'll need client ID and client secret. You should know, right? These are not public. In terms of in the code, you don't expose them. So when you work with these items, never say them as a plain text item available to anyone. These are, keys to the account. So you want to make sure that these are secure. So that's the 5 things that you want to get out of that setup is effectively authentication URL, REST-based URL, and SOAP-based URL. If you're working with REST, you only need this. You don't necessarily need SOAP. If you're working with SOAP, you don't need REST. But normally save all 5. And once that's done, then you can start creating and working with all of your different APIs. Now, I did have a collection prepared for you, so let me just kind of edit here. If you go into the postman.com, we now have a public space or workspace. If you go into the Salesforce developers, you will see that we have a pretty cool library here, a very common scenarios that you might need to come across when you're using APIs. They've already sort of been thought for you, so you don't need to reinvent the wheel. And if you never used Postman, I would encourage you to invest a bit of time as a developer, administrator. Like it's a life-saving thing. There's a lot of stuff that you can do through APIs, even on the platform. Like even up to configuring data extensions, journeys, content and stuff. Can save you time when you're working in the platform. So it's not a bad idea to have some nifty snippets of the APIs to run. And then practically when you work with Postman, what I found was a great feature is when you create the API code that like this is the payload that I need to send to, then you generate the code out of the snippet, and it gives you, like, depending on the programming language, supports vast variety of these. It gives you the actual code that already encapsulates the build of this API payload. Really fantastic tool. Anyway, so what we're looking at is we're looking at the Salesforce Marketing Cloud messaging and journeys. Again, limited. It's not including all products and everything, but that's, again, to the beginning. REST and SOAP, right? So you've got SOAP, working with data extensions, automations, subscriber objects, especially relevant for potentially like preference centers and whatnot, knowing some details about subscribers. User configuration, so you can see a list of users. Then administration side of things, maybe you can get like send classifications. Again, not necessarily a full collection because you can create these items, you can configure some other stuff, but it's a fantastic starting point because if you look at any of these details, you kind of start look into how all of that configuration looks like in terms of structuring the code. Like someone done a pretty heavy lifting for you, and you can see these items. These are the variables. So if you set that as a variable, you add it, you can run within that environment. So it's a really, really cool experience to go through. You can operate it from web, you can have an application to run. So that's why, like, to me, this is enormous help for someone who starts their journey with working with Marketing Cloud. One thing I want to say is, quite often when it comes down to developers who kind of work with that first time, it's a key observation that you need to look for is when you're working, I don't know, even with a data extension and maybe like content and whatnot, look at the experience in the user interface. So if you're exploring how to construct a particular call, the payload, I always go and say, don't blindly try to go through just API documentation. It could be some things that you don't quite understand. If you're configuring triggered send programmatically, think about how is it represented in the user interface. If you can relate these items together, then it's much easier to go through the docs, build up the payload. If you're just blindly trying to work your way through and brute force the API structure just using documentation, most of the time you're going to have hard times. So coming to data extension, remember the process and remember how it's sort of all structured together. So if you go up and create a new data extension, you've got a few steps to go through. So in essence, you will see kind of like almost the sections, or like if you're working with JSON payloads, there'll be some sort of objects within the objects or arrays, right? When it comes down to things like fields, maybe. This is what your thinking needs to be. How do I transform that into the API payload, or vice versa? What does it mean? How they relate to each other? Like, oh yeah, I can see the name. Do we have creation method? It's not going to be there. But if I say, well, I want to create from template, somehow there needs to be a reference to the template, right? So again, like these things are tied up together, and it helps sometimes to kind of go through the process to fully understand how they both these items come along. So it is kind of like just more giving you guidance. Now, the other side, what you need to know is, we used to support username and password at SOAP layer. We don't do that anymore, and you will see that this is now replaced, even in this example, is the token. So the token is retrieved through REST. If you go into the REST API, the main thing and the very first thing is you need to go through authentication. So you go request SFMC token. And you will see that in this payload, so we've got client credentials, we're doing client ID, client secret, account ID. If you want to do limit to particular MID, so if you've got multiple business units for the same. And remember I said you can add a scope here as well, so you can actually prescribe the scope, just checking against documentation what you need to do. Once you get the token retrieved, so quite often that's embedded into that test item, so you will see that we're setting up an environment. This is the variable that's going to contain the token. Then basically you use that token even in the SOAP layer, so which was looking at the retrieve data extension here, or whatever. So you will see that security wise, where is that? Action relates to two. Okay, that's a bit odd. It looks like it doesn't include the, hold on, that's the response. Sorry, not the right thing. So you look into the field authentication, so it's the same, that token that's now being used here, passed through as a variable, and then it executes the code. Okay, so you can't use, because remember, you're not in the user environment anymore. We're using authentication, so you get the token first, then you can execute the calls. There is a lifetime of the token, so you need to kind of think through how do you refresh that, how often, where do you store it, but at least you're going to get the idea. So if you start experimenting, if you start looking into that, you get your setup done in Marketing Cloud, you come here, you get that authentication as your #1 call, all right? So you get through the point of building that up, and then you start looking into exploring maybe some of these elements. Maybe look into context, maybe look into transaction and messaging, look at the SOAP, working with data extensions. Like, this is just a starting point. Documentation wise, if you go into any of these, not SDKs, but we're looking into Marketing Cloud APIs, you've got specific product APIs extracted for you, but practically even if I call on any of these, I should be able to get to the mainstream list of APIs and kind of work my way through them. So yeah, explore, make sure that you understand different types as we spoke about that. So you've got Journey Builder API that sits under REST, but I can literally go up into my REST layer and maybe look into different APIs that sit behind the REST altogether itself. So I've got this REST reference, and there is a varieties of methods available to me, similar to SOAP. Some of the interesting examples was recently someone reached out to me. There's a validate email. It's a good chance for your customers where they're collecting data. Quite often this is under looked item. There is another method, to do the phones validation, but even though it's not exposed here publicly, but it's still functional, available for a long period of time. But anyway, you see there's plenty of things here. Permission and scope, as I mentioned before, do familiarize yourself what do they mean, and what are the different things that you can specify. So as I said, even if you have more permissions, you can limit to what you do, so kind of know what these different things are and how they relate to the methods that you need to be calling. There are some best practices and use cases. I would encourage you to read through that. They are useful. Look for some examples, look for some guidelines. It is important to know what are the limitations and what are some good recommendations. And then more importantly as well, how do you work with error handling? So know the codes, handle them correctly and accurately, and then kind of like ensure that they are part of your build. So you're not just trying to push the messages, API messages, but at the same time handling them, making notes, and kind of exposing them and surfacing them if there are any troubles. All right, that's it for today. Any questions, Shibu? Anything that we've got from audience?
Yeah, there's just one, Vlad. How do we set data at REST encryption when using REST API?
Ooh, that's a very nice question. We do not do data at rest through the API. So we do have a SKU that customers can purchase that is encrypted database. I can't remember exactly what the name is, but essentially you can get encryption at rest. That's at database level. So transparent data encryption, I think it's called, coming back to me. Now, if you want to do encrypted data, like if you want to encrypt the data with the keys and then maybe working with the AMP script, you can decrypt it on the fly. That is another supported flow. So in essence, you pushing information in the encrypted format, and you maybe store it as a string or text value in the data extension. And then when you're working with AMP script, you know that that particular DA contains encrypted data. You've got the key configured on the account, you can pull it out and disassemble. There is no specific way to prescriptively say encrypt it on the fly at rest, because unless the customer have that transparent data encryption, as I said, as a SKU, all the data is stored in the way that you provide it. So if you're pushing it encrypted, it's going to be encrypted. If you're pushing it plain text, it's going to be plain text.
Great, thank you, Vlad.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's all we had from questions perspective for today.
Nice, that's great. I'm sure that there were more, but you probably handled them, so it's great. Well, we kind of on the time. If anyone has any questions, do let us know. In terms of content, as I mentioned before, I'll aim to get the actual guides ready for you early next week. I'll try to go through the weekend to make them. If not, as I said, early next week, I'll get them ready for you. So you'll get the guidance on journey configuration, the contact model configuration. We'll get to these landing pages, functional code, so you can build up the properly functioning sort of workflow and get it all stitched as a story, as a continuation from where we started. So it's all aligned to the scenario that we have in the Quip document. I'll add a couple of links from today, so the collection for Postman for Marketing Cloud, as well as the documentation for APIs on the developer, just as a handy links. And yeah, if there'll be any further questions, do let us know. I do sort of want to say that next Friday is, I believe it may or may not be a public holiday here in Australia, so I'll confirm that we might reschedule it to be either Thursday, or if people don't mind, we can still do it during the Friday. We just need to kind of I just need to align it on my end, so apologies if we'll have to reschedule it, but we'll certainly, similar way, we'll get the recording for you in case if we do it and you won't be able to make it, but I'll see if we can actually continue with as planned. But if anyone had any feedback in terms of, if people are not going to be able to make it, majority of you, then probably worthwhile for us rescheduling it. Outside of that, that's it for today. I'm just checking stop sharing, just see if there is anything that worth. Nothing else popped up in the questions for now. Assuming no, we're good. All right. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend, and I'll speak to you in a week's time.
All right.
Goodbye.
Thank you, Vlad. Thank you, everyone. Bye.